So I'd like to begin by sharing some information or bios around Chuck and Andy. These are greatly abbreviated. There's so much more behind these two gentlemen with us today, and I will share with you after today's presentation also more information about them and who they are. So we'll start with Captain Charles Chuck Webb. Captain Webb assumed command as the 42nd Commanding Air Officer or Officer of Air Station Traverse City in July of 2019. Captain Webb hails from Muskegon, Michigan, and transferred here from Air Station Atlantic City, New Jersey, where he served as both the executive officer and operations officer. He began his military career in 1992 as the U.S. Army Aviation Center in Fort Rucker, Alabama, after completing undergraduate studies at Muskegon Community College and the University of Michigan. Having served in a variety of theaters with numerous deployments, Captain Webb's awards, badges, and decorations are consistent with those of service members who have had the honor to serve the United States for over 29 years. He is blissfully married to Lisa, another Michigander from Grand Rapids, and they have two adult sons, Daniel and Austin. Now, one item that I haven't pointed out yet is Chuck has left Traverse City and is now stationed in Colorado. He is currently at the base of Pikes Peak. And then also with us today is Commander G. Andrew Clayton. Commander Andy Clayton currently serves as the Executive Officer of United States Coast Guard Air Station Traverse City. He is second in command of the unit, consisting of 120 military personnel and 40 Coast Guard auxiliary members. Prior to his current assignment, he served as a program examiner on the National Security Division of Office of Management and Budget, OMB, at the White House. Originally from Fredericksburg, Virginia, Commander Clayton is a 2003 graduate of the United States Coast Guard Academy with a degree in civil engineering. He also holds a master in aeronautical science, human factors from Embry-Riddle University. He is married to the former Danielle Latorno of Spottsylvania, Virginia. They have two daughters, Kylie and Madison, ages 12 and 10. And here I will share my screen. And Captain Webb, you may take over the reins.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting us to this. And thanks, everyone, for participating. This kind of came from an initiative started last, late winter, early spring with me and Mr. Warren Call, and realized that the air station just didn't quite have the ties it should have with Traverse Connect. And so we started building a relationship. And can you guys hear me? I'm getting weird feedback.
Oh, here, let me do something. Maybe it's my.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. All right. So anyway, and it turned out to, the invite to speak to the Leadership Roundtable, and we felt it was, appropriate with Andy and I being sort of the leaders of the air station, and then talking with leaders from the community. So we really appreciate it. Just to be clear, I am no longer the air station commander. This initiative started when I was the commander, and then it got delayed. And part of the intent was to have the new commanding officer, Commander Chris Wright, be part of this. But with schedules changing, he couldn't make it. And we've got Commander Clayton, which is actually, you guys did better because Andy he worked for both me and he works for Chris, and he's done an outstanding job of keeping us both out of jail so far. And he's really the brains and the leadership behind us. So I apologize. I had told Brenda I would try to have Pikes Peak in the background of my picture. Thought thought, even if you didn't enjoy the presentation, at least you got a live feed of Pikes Peak. But there was too much glare, so I pulled down our picture of Fishtown and put it behind me so you guys can think I'm in Leland presenting this for you. So yeah, I'm currently out at NORAD and U.S. Northern Command, North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD. I think everyone's heard of them. They track Santa. But the mission out here, where I've switched to, because people ask, so I'll just go through it really quick. We're doing all the defense ops of the U.S., Canada, Mexico, Bahamas, Bermuda, Virgin Islands. That's our job, is to protect the homeland. And beyond hurricanes, what's going on in the southwest border, wildfires across the west, Operation Allies Welcome, the Afghanis that are coming back here. We're involved with all of it. And on top of that, we're watching all the threats out there to the homeland. And as a saying, I was fortunate enough to be stationed out here before on a previous staff assignment. And as the saying goes, if you're not paranoid when you get here, you're damn sure paranoid by the time you leave. And it's no different right now. I can't say a lot. I'll say so far it's good. Iran's pretty sleepy. North Korea is waking up again, and China and Russia keep us on our toes daily. But I can promise you this: Santa will be safe again this Christmas, and he will be successful. So what we're going to do is, and I don't know if you saw the very first slide, but it just said it had Guardians of the Great Lakes, and then I added to it and beyond. The motto of Air Station Traverse City is Guardians of the Great Lakes, but we'll talk about it. We do much beyond the Great Lakes, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So what we're going to do is kind of go through sort of a Coast Guard 101. Sorry, you're going to have to just bear with us with a little bit of academics to level the bubbles. And then we're going to go through sort of what goes on with Air Station Traverse City. Believe it or not, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what the air station's about. We're going to cover that. And as we go through it, we're going to talk leadership through the process. So you can go back to that other slide on the picture of the helicopter. So we'll start out with this one. I figured this one would be a little gift before we get into the academics to keep everyone's interest, because first of all, everyone's mostly interested in the helicopters that we have, and I just thought this was a pretty cool picture. But I'll use this to talk a little bit about our aircraft that we have here. I think everyone's probably seen these flying around. It's the MH-60T. We have 3 of them. We got them in 2017. Prior to that, we had the H-65 Dolphin, which I think I should have put a picture of it up there, but it's the small little orange helicopter saw flying around. We had 5 and then 4 of those. Each aircraft has its pros and cons, but for what we're doing in Traverse City, the MH-60 is definitely the right aircraft. Far more capable for what we're doing up here. It can fly for up to 6 hours. Generally, we have a crew of 4, 2 pilots, a flight mechanic in the back, who also operates our hoist, our rescue hoist, and then the rescue swimmer. It's got weather and surface search radar on it. It's got electro-optical and infrared sensors on it. We fly with MVGs at night. Very capable aircraft, lots of power, great for the weather that we experience up in Traverse City. And Andy, if you got anything you want to add to that, please do so. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. So maybe not so much the fun stuff, but a little bit of the Coast Guard 101, so people get an idea where we are. And like I said, we'll level the bubbles and get a good feel of what the Coast Guard does, and then that makes more sense for the purpose of Traverse City up in Michigan. So, yeah, a whole bunch of words there on the slide. Coast Guard authorities. What's really unique about the Coast Guard is the fact that we pretty much have more authorities from Congress to do things than any other service, definitely over any other military service. All the military services work under Title 10, and really that's it. And I've got 2 slides of titles we do. Now, the 2 biggest ones to zoom in on is Title 10, which is doing military type operations, being an armed force, which the Coast Guard is. we are an armed force, we are a military, we just don't fall under the Department of Defense. We fall under the Department of Homeland Security. And there are reasons for that. And I won't go into total detail on it, but there's a thing called the Posse Comitatus Act, which essentially goes back hundreds of years, and it prevents military forces from, doing law enforcement type activities. And the Coast Guard's the only one that has that authority, because we are also a law enforcement agency. And when you look at our Title 14, that's really our Coast Guard authorities. That's what gives us our authorities to do what we're doing every day out there. And, there's all kinds of stuff that we do. But at any moment, we can be Title 10 as well. And then we can go through, the rest of those. You can see all the different other authorities we have that gives us abilities to do things around the country, because, and I'll just bring up like Title 46 on shipping. I know most people think because of the air station in Traverse City, we're there doing search and rescue, patrolling the coast and that, but there's a whole nother side to the Coast Guard that's really regulatory. You think of the Federal Aviation Administration for setting aviation rules. Well, the Coast Guard sets maritime rules. So you think of all the maritime traffic that goes on around this country, we're responsible for that too. So we're not going to go into detail on the rest of them, but at least you get an idea of how we work and why we're so unique with all the authorities we have. Next slide, please. This is just another picture of the helicopter, since I had to bore you with those a little bit of academics, so a little gift, but just another close-up. You can see the sensors up front with the radar sticking out of the nose and the little ball hanging off the bottom. That's our electro, optical, and infrared sensor. And next slide, please. Okay, so now get into the 11 statutory missions that the Coast Guard does. And you can see they're kind of bend them into three major topics there, with maritime safety, maritime security, and maritime stewardship. And then you can see the missions that kind of fall under each category. So the big one that especially Air Station Traverse City, and the number one reason Air Station Traverse City is search and rescue. All right, that's our bread and butter. That's the main thing we do. But with that, there are other things we do. Not so much in maritime safety. Marine safety would be more like inspectors going out and checking, the conditions of a ship or a boat or something like that. It's cut off a little bit, but there's the marine resources. The resources should be in the third column, but under maritime security, ports, waterways, and coastal security, we do a lot of that as well. We're flying all over the Great Lakes, checking out what's going on, looking for hazards to navigation. For example, with our high water levels, there's a lot of erosion, obviously, on the shoreline, and there are a lot of trees and docks and stairways that have been, ripped from their roots and taken out to sea, and they're out there floating, and they're not marked, and they're hazards to navigation. So we're out looking for those, marking them so that we can try to get the hazard out of there. Drug interdiction, luckily we don't have to do so much of that on the Great Lakes like they do down in the southern parts of the U.S. However, there, with our border with Canada, there is smuggling that goes on back and forth, and we are involved with trying to do some interdiction with that. And migrant interdiction, obviously not what you see on the southwest border or what you see coming across like the Straits of Florida. However, same thing. We do share a border with Canada, so a little bit of that there. Defense readiness. Air Station Traverse City doesn't have to do much with that at all. Other air stations do. When you think of defense readiness on just a daily basis, we've got maritime units that are escorting submarines, for example. That would be considered defense readiness. We've got, believe it or not, where I came from, Atlantic City, we use helicopters to, just like fighter jets, to protect temporary flight restrictions and prohibited airspace. So in the National Capital Region in Washington, D.C., there is a detachment at Reagan Airport of 3 helicopters that are there on alert duty only for NORAD to go intercept violators of the National Capital Region airspace. And then anywhere the president goes, we send a detachment to go protect that airspace as well. Maritime stewardship, ice operations. Yes, we do a lot of that on the Great Lakes. That's a big thing of what we do in the winter. We're out assisting our icebreakers in the job they're trying to do to keep commerce flowing through the Great Lakes. And I think everyone knows the history of the Great Lakes, the commerce flowing, especially you look back to World War II, extremely important to the economic well-being of this nation. Aids to navigation. So think of the lighthouses out there. You think in this day and age with GPS, you don't really need lighthouses, yet we still need lighthouses. We need those defined markers that aren't going to change, that their signal is not going to be disrupted to ensure maritime safety out there. And those lighthouses are still being serviced by the Coast Guard, and a lot of them are very difficult to reach, and that's where our helicopters come into play to help get those teams out there. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. To go marine environmental protection, you think of trying to prevent an oil spill, for example. We get reports all the time of freighters. Hey, we think we see a slick, we'll go out there and take a look at it. If in fact there is something, then we have marine environmental response teams that will go and handle it. Living marine resources. Hey, the fisheries are big on the Great Lakes. That's a big deal. You get into a lot of issues with the state lines between Michigan and Wisconsin, for example, let alone between Michigan and Canada. We will get involved with ensuring people are following the law on there. And then, other law enforcement type missions, there's all kinds of different things that pop up. And on top of that, we can assist other government agencies. So we do a lot with assisting local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and even federal law enforcement. Andy, you got anything you want to add to any of this?
Not right now. No.
All right, cool, thanks. All right, next slide, please. So 2 slides of organizational charts. There's no way I would let you guys sit through a military type briefing without the obligatory organizational charts. So here's the first one. So this is the way the Coast Guard's organized. We have a commandant. We don't have a service chief like the Air Force or the Army have. We have a 4-star officer in charge, but it's a commandant, much like the Marines. And the reason it's a commandant, not a service chief, is because in times of war, we can get activated and fall under the Department of the Navy. And then there's a service chief there. So therefore we have a commandant. And then, so the way the Coast Guard divides itself up from an operational perspective underneath the commandant and the headquarters is we divide the world into 2 areas, Atlantic area and Pacific area. So on the picture there, Atlantic area is blue and Pacific area is green. And the dividing line is basically around the Rocky Mountains. And they extend all the way around the globe, and then their line meets up again, I think somewhere around the Indian Ocean. So, we are doing operations in, in the Persian Gulf, and that falls under Atlantic area. They're in charge of those operations. You think of all the operations down, in the Caribbean for, anti-drug type or counter-drug type operations. Atlantic area is handling that. We also do it in the Eastern Pacific. Pacific area is doing that. And then from those areas, the Coast Guard divides itself down into sectors, and that's where you can see those segments of states. So for the Great Lakes, you can see it's District 9, and the headquarters for that is in Cleveland, and that's commanded by a 2-star admiral, and currently it's Admiral Johnston. And then from there, certain districts will have air stations, and this is where Air Station Traverse City falls in. And for the Great Lakes, there are 2 air stations. There's Traverse City, and then there's Air Station Detroit, which is located at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. There's also sectors, if anyone's heard that before. There's the way geographically the Coast Guard divides the districts is into sectors. So in the Great Lakes, we have a sector in Buffalo, one in Detroit, one in Milwaukee, and one in Sault Ste. Marie. And so they segment up that district into their areas of operation. But the air stations do not work for those sectors, and that's why I didn't show it on there. So the air station works directly for the district. And we'll go to the next slide, please. And then, okay, our last organizational chart. This is how Air Station Traverse City is organized. We'll start getting into the meat a little bit here about how Traverse City works and what we do. So obviously you got the commanding officer in charge, and then immediately under that, the executive officer, which is Andy there. And attached to him, we have a medical department. So we have a flight surgeon. Basically that's a doctor who's specialized in aviation medicine. And then as well as our command master chief. So he's the head of all of our enlisted personnel. And then you can see the next line down, the next row is all of the departments that we organize ourselves into. And in reality, if you look, you can see the executive officer is the one that he's sort of the point of integration of all that. So from here, if you want, Andy, I'll let you talk about it since you're far more intimate with the inner workings of that than me.
Sure, thanks. So from there, everything is just split down into a different line of business. Really not unlike any kind of corporation is going to be. At Traverse City, we're a little unique in the fact that we have, in addition to the aviation mission, we've got all the support function that's tied in there too. So administration is pay and personnel and HR type stuff. Aviation engineering, those are our crews that are going to fix and repair the helicopters and keep putting airworthy helicopters on the line that we feel safe flying in. Facilities, we've got a facilities engineering or a public works department, just like the city does, or anybody with a large facility. We've got about 48 acres on base. We've got 18 buildings on there. In those buildings, we have some unique functions. Chuck mentioned we have a medical clinic, and we're talking kind of like not emergency room, but like an urgent care type facility that we manage. We have a galley that we manage. As you can imagine, we generate a fair amount of hazardous waste with all of the chemicals and fluids that are used in aviation maintenance. So we've got that line of effort in there. Operations is scheduling, proficiency, making sure we're doing all those statutory missions that Chuck outlined. We're sending people downrange on deployments, certainly throughout the entire US and across the globe. Safety, any aviation program has a strong safety culture. So we have people that go to about a year of training, and they get trained in not only OSHA compliance and things like that, but just how to build a safety culture and how to, we have a very high level of transparency in our safety culture. So if I go out and I make a mistake in flight, I'm going to come back and even though I'm the XO, I'm going to sit down and we're going to have the pilot chat, and I'm going to say, hey guys, this is what I did yesterday. This is how I made this mistake. Luckily, so-and-so caught it, and we didn't have a mishap. We didn't bend any metal. We didn't hurt anybody, but let's learn from this. And then we have a supply, kind of that little bit of the CFO managing our budget. We've got a not insignificant budget of about $1.1 million, and then probably another $1 million for fuel. So not insignificant budget. And then all of our procurement specialists that manage that. And then we talked about our galley, running the galley. So that's kind of the breakout of how our organization is structured there.
Great, let's go on. We'll go to the next slide. And the last piece to it is we also have a Coast Guard Air Auxiliary, and I'll take a few minutes to talk about them. So the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and particularly for us, the Air Auxiliary, it's all volunteers. These are people that want to be involved with the Coast Guard and assist the Coast Guard and even do Coast Guard missions. And it's all purely on a voluntary basis. And I tell you, my hat's off to these people. I don't think I could do it if I retired and wanted to volunteer. The amount of requirements we put on them is really no different than what we put on our own active duty members. And these people step up and do it. And we have them right here in our community. And it's a great thing. It is such a blessing to have people like that. And they really, really are a force multiplier for the air station. You know, so you can see the numbers there. We've got basically 15 aircraft, and these are privately owned aircraft. These are people, they own their aircraft and they want to use them to help out the Coast Guard. Now they do get some money to cover the cost of flying the aircraft and maintenance, but it does not cover the full cost of what it really is per flight hour. When you look at the fact that I talked about when we had the other helicopter here and we transitioned in 2017, we had, at that time we had 4. A couple of years prior to that, we had 5 of them. And now we're down to 3. Okay, we have a much more capable helicopter, but no matter what, I mean, it's simple laws of physics. We have less helicopters. So that means there are less missions we can do. And this is where the Coast Guard Auxiliary has really stepped up to the plate and helped cover us on the missions that we can no longer do because we just don't have enough helicopters up here to do all the missions required. So when you start talking, you know, ice patrols, looking at what the ice is doing, these guys are flying those flights all winter long. Ports, waterways, coastal security, we talked about. They're flying around the Great Lakes, you know, looking at the ports, the conditions of the ports, doing reports on you know, how things are doing out there. And on top of that, they also do logistics missions for us. We need to move some people. For example, when the COVID vaccines started coming out, and we're talking back in December, you know, we were one of the first ones to move vaccines around the Great Lakes. We were moving them for the Indian Health Services, and the auxiliary became a really big part in that for us. So I can't say enough about our Air Auxiliary. They are outstanding, and I mean, just the best people you could have in a community when you think of having volunteers like that. And next slide. Okay, so what I wanted to do was, you know, we're going to talk leadership as we go through this, but I decided, I said, you know what, I'm going to take 2 minutes and think about, write down as fast as I can what sticks out in my mind of the 2 years in command and sort of the leadership philosophies and where we were. So I'm going to run through these and just give you some background of what I was thinking about when I said it, or when I wrote it down, and then it'll give you an idea of where we're coming from as we go through the rest of the presentation. So the first one, where it says true professionals, truly America's best, you know, and this ties in really to the second one, where volunteered to put their life on the line for our nation's citizens and do that daily. So I'm talking about the people at the air station. You know, it's an all voluntary force, right? No one's come in on the draft. So everyone that's there is volunteered to be there. And there are, you know, I talked a little bit about it with the auxiliary. There are big time requirements that everyone has to meet in order to be qualified in the job they do. And not only is it all the training to get up to speed and be qualified in the job, but it's continual training on a daily basis to maintain the standard. And everyone at that air station does that. It's incredible. It's incredible the dedication these people put there, knowing that the job they are volunteering for they will be putting their life on the line at some time or another. We're not talking just war. You know, the operations we do, search and rescue, some of the tasks we have to accomplish, we are putting our lives on the line really on a daily basis, and they know that. And each of those people, they have a unique reason they joined the Coast Guard. It might be, I want to serve the nation. I want to, you know, I picked the Coast Guard specifically because of the life-saving mission. They all have different motivations, but they all want to be there. And understanding those motivations of that person is key to get the most performance out of them. Okay, and these are really in no logical order. It's how they popped in my head. So the be present, this has more to do with, you know, you as the leader of the organization. You have to be present. Okay. You can't be, you know, yes, I know there are demands and you have to be off and doing meetings in other places and go on trips for business and everything, but you've got to be back at the unit. You've got to make yourself present. You've got to get in all the spaces and let everyone know that you are paying attention to what they're doing and you are interested in what they're doing. And when you set that example, you will get the performance out of the people, and the morale goes high. And when you think of COVID, you know, and I'll take just a few seconds to talk about that. When you look at what an air station has to do, it's all a team. It's teamwork, and it's teamwork where you have to be together. There are activities you cannot do over Zoom. You can't do from home. So that obviously posed a lot of challenges to us. One, to continue our mission, but two, how do we keep our people together to continue the mission yet protect them? Especially in the early days of COVID, when we really didn't understand, you know, what the results were going to be and ramifications. That, you know, there was a lot of concern about our part. Number one was keeping our people safe, but we still had a mission to do. So, you know, one example of being present was we mandated we did it once a week over Zoom. Well, at first it started out, before we had Zoom, started out over just phone conferences, but then it became, you know, over Zoom once a week. We had a full, all hands, everyone participate. And it was basically so everyone could still see each other. Everyone knew they were still part of the team. And, you know, more importantly, they saw the leadership presence and knew the leadership presence was still engaged, still paying attention, still involved. Nothing changed. We were just, the only thing that changed is we were having to, you know, do our work organization a little bit differently. There were meetings we had where we had really nothing to put out, nothing to talk about, but we still did it because it hammered home that message, and it kept up that image. So stay positive and take nothing for granted. You know, I think, you know, COVID is a perfect example. If you let whatever crisis is at hand beat you, and you start being negative and you succumb to it, the organization is going to go in the same direction. So I know I always tried to maintain positivity, see the bright side on things, optimism, know we're going to get through it, and continue to press that message along. And, you know, I think it was pretty successful. When you look at the accomplishments the air station did, we never missed a beat in COVID. We never had a transmission of the virus at work. We never missed a flight. We never missed a mission. We never missed a rescue. Even in some pretty draconian workforce reorganization, we were still able to do it. But it's because we maintained that positivity. And it goes with taking nothing for granted. You know, you can't stay positive. You can't, let me rephrase this. You maintain that positivity, but you can't act like you're aloof either. Like, oh, everything's just great. No. You still got to be paying attention to things and make sure you're communicating, you're understanding the ramifications and the seriousness and the gravity of the situations. You know, don't walk past a mistake. I think everyone kind of knows that one, but especially under COVID, things changed. People were having to adapt, but it doesn't mean you had to let up on the standard. We couldn't let up on the standard. And in some ways, paying attention to mistakes became a much more important piece than it is in a non-COVID environment. So loyalty is a two-way street. You know, when I think everyone's probably heard in the military, you know, there's a chain of command and everyone reports that chain of command and there's loyalty. Yes, there is loyalty from bottom up, but there is loyalty from top down. In fact, you know, at 30 years in the military now, what I'm learning more and more is the loyalty from the top down is far more important than the loyalty from the top up. Because if the loyalty from the top down is demonstrated and it's acted upon on a daily basis, you will get the loyalty from the bottom up. You know, I tell this to everybody every time we would meet. We're a team. We can't do our mission without each other. And in fact, you know, I can't do my mission without the team. The team can't do the mission without me. And we're all going to do our parts. But bottom line, the commanding officer has the ultimate responsibility. And so someone has to make that decision for the team. And that's the commanding officer's job. The commanding officer is the one that has to, you know, report to all the entities outside of the unit. So, you know, something goes haywire, first thing I've got is Admiral Johnston in Cleveland calling me, and then it can go from there, and it can get really ugly and go to Congress and you name it. Fortunately, none of that ever happened on our watch in Traverse City, but that CO is responsible. So the team does its job, but when the CO has to make a decision, even if it's an unpopular one, that's final. CO ends up getting 51% of the vote. Initiative in your duties. This is something I would charge our people with. It's one thing to do your duties. Okay, cool. Let's maintain the status quo. But that doesn't help us evolve. And we have to evolve. Yes, search and rescue has been happening for hundreds of years, but it has evolved as technology has evolved, as well as we've gotten smarter about things. And we can't go, okay, we've got the greatest helicopter built right now we're using here in Traverse City. We're good. Let's just do our duties. No, we have to keep advancing the ball. We cannot get stale. We have to evolve. And I would charge people with that. And I'll get into that a little bit, a few of these other bullets. So, the other thing you have to keep in mind, I go back to everyone volunteered to be in the Coast Guard. They want to be there. They want to do their job. They love their jobs. So when they get there, when they make a mistake, and it's going to happen. I mean, it's human nature. Mistakes are going to happen. They're not intentionally doing it. No one comes to work going, hey, I'm going to make some cool mistakes today. They're not doing that. So when they do it, there's times we have to hold them accountable. Sometimes there has to be punishment. But they're going to punish themselves far more than anything the chain of command can do on correcting their behavior and not letting that happen again and taking responsibility. And so you got to keep that in mind, especially when it comes to, holding people accountable. At what level do you need to hold them accountable based upon their dedication to the organization? Which goes into patience and tolerance are a necessity. I tell you what, my patience, I've gotten really good at it. And it was a growing process for me over the 2 years because there were things I wanted to see happen. And you know what? The organization just couldn't do it at the pace I wanted to. And I had to be patient with it and tolerant of the learning process that would have to go to make cultural change. But when we go back to it, and I said it before, you still have to hold those people accountable as they're going for it. Now, holding someone accountable does not have to be some kind of serious, deal. It can simply be, hey, you know what you did, right? Yes, sir. Okay, cool. You got it. Good to go. Not going to happen again. Perfect. Learning experience, held accountable. And the one thing I would tell people, and this goes into initiative in your duties, is unless they're being negligent and flagrantly violating our policies, our TTP, which is tactics, techniques, and procedures, purposely with no good reason not following it. If they go out there and do something, it could be on a search and rescue, and we've got a policy that says X, and the only way they're going to save that life is they have to do Y, and they can justify it. I've got their back. I didn't want anyone going out there flying an aircraft. Here I've given them the responsibility, and I'm assuming the risk for a person to sign for I don't know what they are now, $30 million helicopter, and go out there and do missions in charge of 4 lives as well as whoever else they bring on. So I've already showed my trust and confidence in them. I don't want them second guessing their decision making when they're out there performing that mission. So I would let them know I have their back. But, if they're going to violate procedure, which totally fine, they've got to justify it. So I would hammer that message into them quite a bit. And for the most part, I think it worked out well for us. There's certain things you just have no authority or control over. We went over all the Coast Guard authorities in there. There's some things the Coast Guard wants to do or we've been asked to do, and we can't. We don't have the authority. And the same thing boils right down to the commanding officer of the air station. There are things that, especially in personnel matters, the way I would want to handle a personnel matter, I didn't have the authority to do because there was overriding Coast Guard policies that said you have to do it this way and you don't have a choice. And you got to accept those things. And for example, and I would make sure our personnel would know this. And I'll give you some examples there. So basically, drugs, alcohol, and weight. Okay, so semi-annually, all Coast Guard members have to weigh in, and we have to meet weight standards. And if you don't meet it, there's a process. It's spelled out in a book. It doesn't even go to any person for adjudication if you're not meeting the weight standard. You just follow the policy that's written in the manual. I have no control over that. If you can't make your weight, even if you're the best performer in the world, there's nothing I can do to protect you. And then the same thing goes with, alcohol incidents and drugs. Alcohol, possibly, I may have some influence in if there's something I want to do, but drugs, I have nothing. And so I'd make sure everyone knew, it's like, look, I've got your back, but there are certain things, there is nothing I can do. And you need to understand that. And now it's personal responsibility. Now, please understand that it makes it sound like Traverse City is a bunch of hooligans and problem children. We're not that way. Again, I go back to the very first bullet there. Truly professionals in America's best, just outstanding people working there. And then the last one, excuse me, respect. So I made this. So in the Coast Guard, there's this thing where they want the commanding officer to sort of put out their watchwords kind of thing. And most of them always do 3. And they're, when you look at all the layers above us, there end up being so many words that it's hard to remember them all. I can't even remember them all. I couldn't remember my boss's words. So I kept it down to 1, respect. But there's so much to that, respecting yourself, respecting others, respecting your duties, respecting your job, respecting your community. It goes on. And trying to charge people with that thought process and how they do lead their lives every day in carrying out the unit's missions. And that can sort of transcend into other parts, like safety. When we look at safety and our safety culture and our safety policy, the same thing. That's why I use that one, because it had an ability to transcend across lines within the air station. So a lot of kind of heavy stuff there. We'll be touching on parts of that as we go along, but I just kind of wanted to lay them out before we went any further. So I'll pause there if there's any comments or questions for anybody on it.
Personally,
Okay,
this is Kathy. I really love how this is spelled out. It feels very sort of tangible, even though so much about leadership feels intangible. Yeah. But it's really clear, easy to understand. I feel like it provides a really good outline and perspective of what leaders should be across the board. So I think it's really well done.
Well, thank you for that. Again, this was basically, honestly, 2 minutes of me jotting down on a notepad because, we're all leaders on here, and I know all of us have read tons of leadership and management books and articles and you name it. And I was kind of like, all right, what can I do that Clausewitz hasn't done already, for example? But so that's why I tried to put what was sort of in my mind as I led the unit for 2 years, especially going through, a global pandemic. So that's the perspective. And thank you so much for that comment.
It feels to me that this is something that should be provided to staff. That would be like, here's what you can expect from me as a leader. And then each one can be broken down and dissected and talked about on what that actually looks like. How do I know it when I see it, kind of a thing?
That is so true. And Andy can probably vouch for me. I don't think we did a good enough job of me talking to the next layer down of staff and leadership going through these things. It's the challenge everyone has. You get caught up in the business, and your time is of the essence, really, and your time is being divided amongst so many things. And we talk about these things all the time as leaders within the Coast Guard, and it goes beyond just the leadership piece. There's a whole nother part that goes into our skill set. Flying an aircraft. There's a whole, and we're much better at that. And it's probably because, that you're much closer to death than you are with these things, so we take that a lot more serious. But you're absolutely right. The more as the top leader, the more you can communicate this philosophy or your philosophy to the people, the more you're going to get those results that you want. And you also see that you're going to learn your own mistakes going, you know what, this isn't working. I need to change on this piece. So very great comments. Thank you so much for that, Kathy.
But also in comments, I'm sorry, Jonathan. I know, Christina wrote, I know those who live in the Grand Traverse region have great respect for our Coast Guard. This webinar has deepened my respect and understanding of all of our Coast Guard does on a day-to-day basis. Christina.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It is definitely an honor to serve, and the bonus of being able to serve in Traverse City is, you know, that no one wants to leave. That's the worst thing about Traverse City is you get there and you know you're going to have to leave. I kind of lucked out. I find Colorado to be a pretty good close second, but it's tough leaving Traverse City. And that's why we'll be back. Well, I mean, I think everyone heard we're Michiganders at heart, and we got relatives in Traverse City and all that, but we'll be back eventually. But I still got to go off and do other things for a while. Next slide, please.
I think you mind taking a comment from Jonathan?
Oh, please. Yeah.
Only if it doesn't get us off track.
No, we're good. Please.
When I looked at this, my mind goes to you were defining a value set for the organization, and they're defined as actions that are easily understood. That's describing how, and to me, values are how an organization is supposed to behave. And it seemed like you spelled it out where it's very, very clear. This is how we behave, all of us. But I want to get your perspective on that. If that's, maybe you have a different value set than this, but
no. I thank you. That's a great observation. And the reason being is, you know, I have to let my people go out there and do things. When they take off in the helicopter, they're on their own. I got to trust them. They've got to do it. So I can't micromanage. First of all, I don't want to micromanage their flight, but I can't micromanage their flight, even if I was that type of person. So that's exactly it. By giving them those values, I know they've got the lanes that they can do whatever they need to within to go make things happen. And they make great things happen. And that's all they're looking for. It's just a little bit of guidance. And then from there, you let them go, and it's amazing what they'll come back with. I mean, every time I've charged people with either a mission or just some project around base, I'm just always so, or I should say, I always was so impressed with what they came back with, exceeding all my expectations. And by you know, giving them basically those lanes to maneuver within, but making them wide lanes, you reach those successes.
agreed. Love it.
Thanks.
So Chuck, can I just say one thing real quick? So one of the things that's unique about the Coast Guard, I think, is we grow our own. We don't bring anybody in that's got 10 or 15 years experience in our industry. We hired all of these people at 18 to probably 25 years of age, and then we've grown our own. So that's where you see all this patience and tolerance for mistakes, you know, but accountability, because we're growing everybody, and we're trying to get them to the point of being masters of what they do and expert leaders and everything. So there's a lot of growth, and therefore there's a lot of mistakes. And I think Chuck undersold it. We probably didn't do as much as we would like to, as far as pushing all of these out and equipping our people with our idea, our vision of what success looks like at the unit. But, you know, we tried to as much as possible, because what he said, our helicopter launches in Traverse City at 2 o'clock in the morning to go up to Lake Superior. And they are 4 souls alone and unafraid up there operating. And so they absolutely have to know what the CO expects of them and what the CO wants to see happen, because there's no communications. So I think creating that vision and making sure everybody understands what you believe and how you want to see it run is really important. And that's what we try to do. But like you said, you know, you run out of time in the day to get there. But that's that safety culture where we talk about mistakes, not just at our unit, but other units. And it's just kind of sitting around, the pilots sitting around and talking with their hands and doing all that stuff. But talking about it and saying, hey, this is what I would have done differently. This is how we could have had greater success, or all of these actions led to a success. And that kind of, that's one of the ways that we we kind of share all of these points with our members and make sure they have the toolkit to go out and execute missions for us.
Well said. We could, if we stall out on this slide and finish out the rest of the 2 hours, I'll be happy. But you can keep it back on the previous slide, Brenda. I'll make one last comment on that. Again, if we just talk leadership from here on out, cool stuff. There's a thing called mission command, and what that means is you're charging your people to go out with, you give them basically a commander's guidance, which needs to be simple and clear and understood several layers down. So, if I put out some guidance, Andy's going to understand it. We're working together every day. He knows where my head is, but several layers down below me, they need to be able to understand that. And they need to be able to take that and go, okay, I got it. And I can go and make this mission happen, make this project happen, whatever I'm being assigned to do, I've got it. And it can't be complicated, and it allows them the freedom of maneuver. There's argument these days that our military is becoming too process oriented, and we're losing that mission command and operational art, for another way to discuss it. And I can tell you that weighed on my mind through command, to make sure we weren't going down those roads where we were getting too caught up in process and not giving our people the freedom of maneuver to go out there and do great things. And I think we stayed pretty successful at it. So any final comments on it? This is a great discussion.
Well, I would just make one comment in one of the bullet points that really stands out for me on this is the initiative in your duties, which I love that comment. I don't know that I would say duties quite the same way in a non-military setting, but if you could think of a coaching example or something that you would share that would bring that home, I would really appreciate it. And I think that also ties to it's not just about process. There is an art form there as well, but that carries down to your own initiative.
Yes. And you know what? Actually, I give an example of a search and rescue case, and I will give you a real world example of that initiative piece as we get to it in the slides. Will that work?
Yes, please.
Okay, great.
Can I just add one more, well, actually two more pieces. I would love to see the stay positive piece and take nothing for granted separated. I feel as if those are two very distinct qualities. But what really hits me is members don't intentionally make mistakes. I feel like sometimes when you're in a leadership role for a long time, you can get jaded because of negative experiences. And that negative experience can carry over into assumptions made about others. And I feel like that is like such an important factor. I got like little goosebumps when I read that one. So thank you for including that.
No, you're welcome. And I agree that take nothing for granted is, and that's almost like don't walk past a mistake. I looped it in just because, you don't want to go so far beyond the cheerleader role that you start seeming like you're aloof, like, oh, everything's great. And that's kind of how it ended up there. But you're absolutely right. It is also its own point. Anything else?
I just, Chuck, and Andy, for you both, just a huge credit to both your leadership, because I've interacted with a lot of Coast Guard, both current, active, as well as maybe retired or recently retired within the community, and they always are true professionals. So, it's one thing to suit it up when you're at work doing your job, but to take that home, whether you're out in the community, in your neighborhood, whatever that looks like. So always just top professionals. So credit to both of you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Well, thank you. No, thank you. And we're going to talk a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation. And, when we go back where, my watchword respect, that was one of the things I hammered in is you are leaders in the community, and you've got to act that way. And you've got to show respect to your citizens around you. So thank you for that. Any last ones? Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide then. All right, this one basically, I put this here to show you that, everyone thinks, all right, they got the Baywatch impression, we're just out there flying nonstop, always doing rescues. We do a fair amount, but that's not that's not the battle rhythm of a typical day. They come up at any time. I think, we do roughly 175 search and rescue cases a year. Half of those happen between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So when you scatter that out over the year, we're not doing that all the time. And there's a lot of other things that have to take place. There's the mundane. There is exciting things, but there are things that have to occur, and you can see it. I mean, the top left picture, we're always doing aircraft maintenance. The MH-60, I said there's pros and cons of each helicopter. The cons of the MH-60 is it's much more maintenance intensive. Amazing machine. I love it. My favorite helicopter I've flown, but very maintenance intensive. We got our galley. So daily, there's 3 meals being produced. And I'm telling you, these guys are awesome. We get some of the best. Right now, we've got some guys that are really into making Pacific Island type food. So I guarantee you, we have some of the best huli chicken on the days they serve it of anywhere in Michigan. And you're all invited to come out and have some. It's amazing. You can see the picture at the bottom. Our guys working out on the facilities, repairing. They're working out on our one of the shelters. Wintertime, we're plowing snow. Summertime, we're cutting grass. Andy said it. We got like 40 acres. There's a lot of grass to cut, and then there's a lot of snow to plow. And those are 18-year-old kids driving that snow machine. In fact, we had one girl. She came in from like out by the Palm Springs area. She grew up in the desert and joined the Coast Guard, goes to boot camp, gets sent to Traverse City while she's waiting. The way it kind of works for someone goes to boot camp, then they'll get sent to a unit, and they're called a non-rate because they're not rated in their specialty yet, and they're waiting to go to school. And so we end up using them for whatever we need labor-wise. Well, Traverse City, they're driving snow plows. So this 18-year-old girl grows up in the desert, never dealt with snow in her life. And in a month, she is qualified and driving one of those machines like a professional. It's awesome to see that, to watch these people take on whatever task is handed to them and excel. And then, the bottom left, I had to put, we were able to get an ice rink last year, an outdoor ice rink. And that was one of the things I was most proud of. I guess probably because I'm a hockey player, but it was great. So there's a morale piece too. We've got to do things together morale wise and fun stuff. And that's why the ice rink's on there. Next slide, please. So just to give you a scope of it, our area of responsibility, we've got all of Lake Michigan, the northern half of Lake Huron, and all of Lake Superior. And with that, there's all the inland lakes that go on, and lots of inland search and rescue, which is technically over land is the Air Force's responsibility, but since they have no assets up here, we do all that for them. So a big area. Detroit takes the rest of the Great Lakes, but that being said, there are times weather-wise or for whatever reason, Detroit can't do it. So we're going out to Lake Ontario actually from Traverse City. I won't say frequently, but occasionally we're going out there to support that. So on a daily basis, we've got all those areas. Next slide. Okay, so our mission. So search and rescue, and I picked this one because I think everyone remembers this a couple summers ago. This is right in West Bay, the boat that sunk. And this goes to, okay, so we wanted an example of initiative, and this is the one I'm going to use for it. So our crew that was on duty that day, they had just taken off on a training flight. So when you're on duty, it's like a firehouse. You're on duty for 24 hours, and any case that comes up, you're responding to it. But when you're on duty for those 24 hours, we don't want you just sitting around. We want you to train. So you get a training flight at some point in those 24 hours. So they just took off on a training flight, and they were flying up West Bay. They were going up north somewhere. And they heard over the radio, a call of distress, and it was this boat. Now, the way our process works, and this goes into where I said not getting caught up in process, the way our process works is they would have to get diverted through official channels to go respond to this. Well, when they heard the call, they realized they had just flown over the boat. It hadn't sunk yet, but they're running into trouble. They had just flown over it, and it was a mile or two behind them. So why would you not respond? So instead of waiting for that process to occur, they immediately took the initiative to divert themselves to go see what was going on. When they got on scene, it was 9 minutes from them getting on scene until that boat sunk. Had they not taken the initiative, there is no way we would have effected this rescue. And yes, and thank goodness there was a good Samaritan. And if you look in the picture, in the two pictures at the top, you can see they're both there. They were there because we did not have time to hoist them into the helicopter because of how quickly the boat was sinking. So our rescue swimmer was able to get those people off the boat onto that Good Samaritan platform. But had we not been there, the problem was one of the people, well, really two. There was one person on that vessel that was a stroke victim and was pretty much immobile from the neck down. And then there was a child who had autism, who was basically locked himself in the cabin. So had we not been there and that boat sunk, I think everyone knows where this would have gone. So if those guys did not take the initiative, we would have never had the success that we saw here, where we ended up rescuing, I think, 9 people. So they didn't follow process, and they took initiative, and good things happened. So hopefully that is an example of what you're looking for on initiative on the question.
Yes, thank you. That's a perfect example. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lori. Okay, next slide. And then just so you know, when we're doing search and rescue, it's just not us out there by ourselves. This past summer, that plane went down up off of Charlevoix. We got there, but the boat out of Charlevoix got there. And when it comes to hoisting, we're not going to hoist if we don't have to. Hoisting is a high risk evolution. With a boat there, that boat was able to pull up on scene and get the person. So we were working together in conjunction with the boat. And the other pictures you can just see, we also do medevacs. I think the one we're up on Beaver Island, medevacing somebody. You see we're on a beach working to medevac somebody. And then of course there's the other rescues that go on. And those are just pictures of SAR cases at the bottom, but you get an idea what I talked about, how we have the infrared sensor. That's what it looks like looking through there. So just some more examples of the different search and rescue and medevac type things we do there. Next slide, please. And then I threw this one on because, it also goes into the winter time. And I think everyone remembers, or probably remembers hearing about last winter out in Green Bay when an ice floe broke off and there were about 67 people stranded out on the ice floe. And we sent one helicopter, our duty helicopter. And again, initiative. We had a guy that was going on a training flight and said, we need to divert for this. And they took the initiative and went out there, and we needed the 2 helicopters. We weren't hoisting. There were rescue people on the surface, but the area was so big, we needed the helicopters to go out and find all the pockets of people. And so our rescue swimmers were on the ice coordinating. We would go out and find, and then they would direct and go from there. So now, granted, people probably heard stories. There were some guys out there on the ice who didn't want to leave because the fish were biting. But we strongly encourage them and let them know that this is their one chance to get rescued. And we would also be letting their families know that they turned down the rescue. So when they did make it home, that was going to be way worse to deal with, most likely. But anyway, another example of what you're going to deal with out there. And this is why on-scene initiative is so important. You just don't know what you're going to get. And to make sure those crews understand that I've got full confidence in them, in the decisions they make to prosecute that case, to get the job done. so that they're not second guessing themselves. That is that culture. Those are those values that I'm trying to communicate. Next slide, please. Oh, and here you go. There are the fruits of our labor. That's a family. They're two brothers, one of the brothers' wives and their kids, and of course a dog. Everyone wants to know about the dogs, but stranded up in the Upper Peninsula. Long story. Anyway, we rescued them. So there you go. There's where it pays off. Next slide, please. So, search and rescue is our main business, but I talked about it, and, ports, waterways, and coastal security. So we're flying all over the Great Lakes. That's why I was trying to show, look, there's Chicago, all the different places we go and the things that we're doing around the Great Lakes. There's so much beyond just search and rescue that we do. And, the other cool thing is, look at that. That's our office. That's an office with $1 billion view right there. So it's pretty good. That's why all of us don't want to leave Traverse City, and everyone wants to be a pilot. It's pretty cool. All right, next slide. Yeah, there's another view. There's pretty awesome view. If anyone knows where that is, I'll send them a unit patch if they can chime in and say where that's taken from. But what I will say is, you look at it close. I knew that would be the answer. Close. But when you look at it and you saw the picture of the Sulaks, you saw Chicago, ports, there is a lot of infrastructure on the Great Lakes, and critical to not only the nation's economics, but also the nation's security. And that's one of the roles we play is ensuring that infrastructure is still doing its thing up here. We have, we're just one small part of it, but that's part of that goes in there. All right, I didn't see an answer yet. That's actually South Manitou. It's the west side of South Manitou Island. Next slide, please. So we talked lighthouses. So we're out there going all over some cool places around the Great Lakes, assisting our aids to navigation teams, getting them out to those lighthouses so they can ensure they're still functioning properly for maritime safety and ensure that commerce is flowing. It's still a big deal to the freighters out there. Next slide. This one I just put up because this one got a lot of press. That's out at Standard Rock Light. It's out in the middle of Lake Superior. They call it the loneliest place on earth. And actually I was sitting in the left seat taking the pictures, and trust me, it is the loneliest place on earth out there. But you can see some of the obstacles and challenges that those teams have to face. And, this was in, I think, January or February. I certainly wouldn't want to had to take a boat 30 miles out there in the middle of Lake Superior to get to that lighthouse. And that's where we come into play to help them out. Next slide. All right. So another big thing that the Coast Guard does is, we're a small service, and, I'm going to do my recruiting pitch here. Okay. So we're only, I don't know, 45,000 people. We have a 4,000 person shortage right now. I mean, you think about that, that's 10% of our workforce. And when you think about, so 10%, and just thinking about 40 to 45,000, we're scattered all over the globe. We're doing things everywhere, like every continent. We've got people everywhere. We're doing stuff. I'm a former Army guy. In the Army, the solution is just throw more resources and people at it. In the Coast Guard, we can't do that. And I'm impressed every day. I'm amazed every day at what the Coast Guard accomplishes with such a small resource base. But being 4,000 people short, looking at, roughly 10%, it hurts. And so public outreach becomes a big deal for us, not only just to, let the American people know that their tax money is being used wisely and going to good things, but we really need it for recruiting, especially now. So we're heavily involved with that. I don't know if everyone remembers back in May of 20, we did a big we got all 3 aircraft flying, and we have to train doing formation flying every so often. So we did a little flight around the Traverse region, trying to lift people's spirits, and when we're in the doldrums of COVID. So that's some of those pictures there. So next slide, please. Okay, then the big one, really, training. The majority of our flight hours go to training. And the reason is, if the skill set that's required of us, what we have to do, the task we have to do with the aircraft to actually accomplish a mission successfully are so demanding and so critical and so perishable that we have to spend lots of time training. So, you know, obviously you can see there pictures of us doing hoisting, which is our bread and butter. And, you know, we even have a contract boat, excuse me, that is out on East Bay. So if people see us out on East Bay all the time doing hoisting, that's why. Because anyway, you go through the cost, you know, effectiveness piece. It was way more cost effective to hire a contract boat to be right in West Bay than us traveling to the nearest boat station, Charlevoix, and wasting all that transit time. That transit time costs money, both in, you know, fuel and maintenance, but also just in time. And then we can't use Charlevoix all the time, so we have to fly, you know, over to Wisconsin and use those boat stations, or fly up to Mackinac. So lots of time spent in transition. So we have a contract boat, and it's extremely effective because we can get multiple crews done on one sortie. We can go out and hoist with somebody, bring them back to the air station, bring more people out, because of the demand to maintain this skill set, so that when we are when we are called for someone in their time of need, we're effective and we can accomplish it safely. Next slide. And, you know, we're doing more than just hoisting. We work with the freighters. We've got to deal with the freighters where we go out and practice with them. So when the time comes, and we often do medevacs from them, everyone's proficient, not just our crews, but also the people on deck. You know, we got to deal with the winter environment here. So we've got to do training for ice. We've got to do training for snow landings. And you can see in that bottom left picture, you know, those are very challenging, because as you get closer to the ground, you become engulfed in the snow cloud, and you're in a cloud and you can't see anything, and you're relying purely on instruments to get that aircraft on deck. We got to train ourselves, not just in flying the helicopter, but in survival. So you can see us pictures out there in West Bay doing our annual water survival training that goes on. You know, in all of our anti-exposure gear, trying to make it as realistic as possible to give people confidence in their ability to survive in the situation, God forbid, something happens. Next slide. So what we're looking at, so 19 to 21, that's when I was in command. So that's what these metrics are from. You know, I talked about it earlier, the challenges with COVID, and we still had to do our mission. So yes, we had to restructure ourselves to ensure we could do the mission, but it didn't slow us down. We did our mission. In fact, in fiscal year 20, you know, we had more search and rescue. That was a 10-year high for search and rescue cases, and we did them all. And so you can see the numbers there. And through all that, believe it or not, we actually had, for all of the Coast Guard, every airframe, you think that all the helicopters, all the fixed wing airplanes, Air Station Traverse City had the top aircraft dispatch reliability index in the Coast Guard. And what does that mean? That means we had the most success at launching an aircraft without maintenance problems. So that goes to tell you just, you know, that leadership all the way down the chain, making sure everything's being done properly. It worked. Next slide. All right. So, you know, it's not just Air Station Traverse City. Yes, we're up there. We've got a unique mission, you know, one of only 2 places on the Great Lakes with an air station, but we work with all kinds of other people. We couldn't do most of our missions without all of those other first responders you see listed there. You know, heck, the bottom picture, you can see us working with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We're doing training with them. The picture of the, you know, the sort of the classroom environment this past May, for many reasons, you know, obviously COVID was a factor, but also over time, a lot of relationships with these first responders had atrophied. And so we got everyone together across the region, you know, sheriff, police, fire, dispatchers, you name it. We all came together and talked about, okay, how can we be more effective as a team? And it was extremely successful, such that everyone said, we're going to start doing that on an annual basis. So Andy, I'm charging you. You got to keep that going. I have no influence over that anymore. But Very successful. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I put this one in here just because a lot of people ask, but there's some big parts to it. So, during an election year, there's a lot that goes on, and we were very busy supporting the Secret Service. And I think everyone knows what went on in Traverse City. We had so over the last 2 years, POTUS 3 times with actually Biden, and then Trump and Pence, and then Pence. So, and then there's 2 other visits I'm not going to talk about just because there's a security thing, but then we were also supporting the Secret Service all over the Great Lakes. So we're in Wisconsin all the time, supporting them and doing counter surveillance with them. And the lower left picture is exactly what we're out flying and doing. But you see 69 different missions that we did basically during the campaign season. So we were really busy. And on top of that, when we did have the visitors in Traverse City, we became sort of a hub for support for it. So you can see the top picture, all the support aircraft and everything that came in, and we were hosting them there at the air station. So not just busy out flying on the road supporting the Secret Service, but busy back home right at the hangar. Next slide. And you can see right there, there's Marine One in our hangar. So we had to keep that quiet until they left. I'm sure the word got out, but a lot of different requirements come in once the Secret Service and the president and all that come in there, and we're right in the middle of it. So just one more thing that you got to deal with when handling all just the daily business of the air station. Throw that in there too. Hey, we got it, no problem. And that is exactly the response that our air station had. And I think it's why they keep using us, because we make it easy for them, but it's because of how professional the team is. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Andy, but I'm just going to say a few higher level, make a few higher level comments. So, I said at the beginning, we're guardians of the Great Lakes, and then I put and beyond. And that's because we deploy and do missions outside of the Great Lakes. The Coast Guard's value proposition to the nation, probably its biggest one, is our ability to surge. When you think of hurricanes, you name it, the Coast Guard is able to flow in forces faster than anybody else and respond, and then we get out of there. We're usually done with our mission by the time DOD can get organized and get there. Now, granted, we don't have persistence like DOD. They can get there and then stay forever. We don't have that ability, but our ability to get there, respond to people immediately in their time of need, and then move on to the next task is our value proposition. So from there, I'll let Andy talk a little bit about the different things we've done over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so over the last couple of years, we've been all over the place. In 2019, we had a crew deployed to the Bahamas when they got leveled by the hurricanes. We obviously deployed to a lot of hurricanes. Last year in 2020, we deployed an air crew and an aircraft to 5 named storms on the east coast of the United States and down along the Gulf Coast. This year, we've deployed to 2 named storms, and we also had a crew down in Haiti for the earthquakes. We've had probably at least a dozen people deployed to either a Coast Guard mission or a DHS mission. The Coast Guard has the largest medical force in the entire Department of Homeland Security. So we are filling the entire department's role of medical personnel down along the southwest border. So we've had a ton of people deployed to the southwest border. Our procurement specialists and our medical folks have been down there. And we have somebody right now that's deployed back to Dulles Airport supporting the Allies Welcome relocation of the Afghans. And so, yeah, and then on their vaccine distribution, we moved vaccine right after, I think it was the day after the Pfizer vaccine was approved. We were moving vaccine for the Indian Health Services all across Wisconsin, Michigan, and the UP. So we had kind of the Pony Express set up for that with air crews, because we have fatigue limits. We can only fly for so many hours. So we positioned air crews and planned the flight so that we flew probably 10 or 11 hours that day with a couple of different crews to move that stuff around. And then we deploy throughout the Great Lakes. We have that ready posture 24/7, 365. And that crew comes on and they might wind up in Duluth for a couple of days. They might wind up in Buffalo for a couple of days. So we do all that. I think this is all, it's motivating. People want purpose in their job. People want purpose in what they do. And so this is motivating, but it does come at a cost for us. And that's one of the constant things. You know, we have to make sure that people understand the purpose, and we have to provide them the purpose, because you can get lost in it. So all those deployments to the Southwest border, to hurricanes, the vaccine distribution, all that comes at a cost, because our unit is postured and billeted to pretty much keep one aircraft here in Traverse City ready to rock and roll. So anytime we put a crew on the road or we send people away, that means our crews back here are pulling more duty. They're working harder, they're working longer hours. And then that crew that goes on the road, they may love it, but they're still gone for 30, 45, 60 days, whatever that deployment is. And that comes at a cost to family life. Next slide, please. And so the next slide is talking about regional economic contributions. So this is kind of back of the napkin math that Chuck and I did, but personnel income. So we are 120 people on average here in Traverse City is our fighting force size. So personnel income, benefits, all of that stuff, housing allowances, it's probably about $8.5 million there. Our unit budget, including fuel and everything, $3.5 million. You know, when we can, we try to buy local. AvFlight benefits greatly from that. We buy all of our fuel from them. Special projects, you know, probably somewhere between $1 million. You see that picture down there. We had aging concrete that wasn't safe for the aircraft and everything for us to be going around it. So that was about a $750,000 project. It was bid by somebody out of state, but Elmer's was the only show in town, so they were the primary subcontractor on that, and all of our big infrastructure projects that kind of round out that $1.5 million are generally provided by local companies here. Visitors, the picture up there, John Courier was a vice commandant of the Coast Guard. He was inducted into a Coast Guard Aviation Hall of Fame. So we had that ceremony here because the Courier family lived here in Traverse City. So we had a lot of distinguished visitors coming from DC and really all throughout the country for those ceremonies. And we have multiple visits that the Coast Guard requires us to have, where they send an inspection team from an office somewhere in the Coast Guard headquarters construct, and they come up. Right now we've got 6 folks from Aviation Training Center Mobile that are up here auditing our flying program right now, and so they're up here on the local economy, staying in the hotel, eating out in the restaurants, and giving us our inspection. Skilled labor, Kathy, you had a comment in there talking about the American corporate partners and how you're serving as a mentor for that program and for one of a military spouse outside of the Traverse City area. So I think 50 is just kind of a wild guess there on what we have, but 120 military members, so that's 120 family units of some size, single all the way up to married with 5, 6 kids that are living in Traverse City. All those kids are in school, and a lot of the spouses are some, you know, are in the economy trying to find jobs. And so those are challenges for the military family. Our members are moving on average probably every 2 to 4 years, despite the federal government's best efforts to try and clean up that whole certification for nurses, teachers, things like that. They haven't gotten there. My wife's a school teacher and a principal here locally, and she applies for a new license every time we move. The Coast Guard is unique to other military services in the fact that a lot of times we are a relatively small portion of the community. I'm not even going to conjecture a guess at how big Traverse City is because I have no idea. But we have 120 family units that are here in Traverse City in the Coast Guard. So I'm sure that's a relatively small percentage of people, even if it is a fairly significant economic impact. It's still a small number of people compared to a Fort Hood, Texas, where there's 10,000 Army families that are there. So I think sometimes communities can be, they know the Coast Guard exists, but they're unfamiliar with military families, military spouses, and what they can bring to their business, to their school, to them as an employee. And sometimes they're afraid of the fact that I said earlier, which is 2 to 4 years. You're hiring somebody, and they probably have an expiration date stamped on their forehead. And so that can deter some employers from hiring them. And so those are some of the challenges that can be really unique to military families. I think a lot of spouses, if you look at their resume, there's going to be gaps on their resume. I mean, my wife had a gap on her resume we lived in Sitka, Alaska, which is a tiny little remote island. There's no roads to get there. You get there by an airplane or a boat. And at the time she was, there were no jobs to be had as a school teacher, and they were also uninterested in hiring somebody that had that expiration date on their forehead. And the other part is in the mentoring, a lot of our spouses are young. The military's, kids get married at 19. Somebody joins the Coast Guard and they move away from everything they've ever known, and here they are in Traverse City, and they're from South Alabama, and here they are in Traverse City, and by 20 they've got their first baby on the way, and so you kind of, that mentoring and everything is we're dealing with a really young folks. Our average age, it might be 30. It's probably not 30 of the average age of our workforce. If you do a weighted average, we're certainly under 30. And so we're dealing with very young junior folks. And so a lot of spouses are working on developing their professional credentials. But then it's just really hard to keep those up and keep finding that gainful employment every time you move. So that's really one of the challenges. And so I think all of our spouses can benefit from any mentorship because they are all starting out their careers, and they don't have the stability that other folks have. If you're from a town and you have resources, family networks, childcare is a huge issue for our people. Traverse City, as you guys know, there's not a lot of childcare. There's not a lot of daycare. And so a lot of people that have that family network locally to support them, our members almost never have that family network to support them. So that can be a huge challenge for military spouses that are looking for employment, is finding childcare. And then volunteering. Our unit has participated in Habitat for Humanity, sending teams out to do constructions. We have some other people that are just really big into Habitat for Humanity on their own. They've drawn people in and gotten kind of the big work parties from our unit to go out. We got tons of football coaches, hockey coaches, everything out in the community, folks volunteering with Traverse City Child Advocacy Center and at the Hope Houses and everywhere across town. So I think that's kind of what our dependents and our spouses bring. I don't even think we've begun to capture how the spouses volunteer in there. Again, we talk about the lack of it can be hard for spouses to find employment, to find the child care that makes the value proposition of going back to work worth it. So we have a lot of spouses that to keep their resume up to date, to keep those gaps from occurring, they're volunteering, and they have volunteer positions where they can bring their skill set to the local area, but they can do it on times and terms that they can work with. If you can go to the next slide. Kathy, do you have any other questions, comments about about kind of I know you were talking about the mentorship program, and maybe Kathy is not on anymore.
She had to leave.
Oh,
She-
okay, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I'll let her know and tell her to like hone in on this time frame.
Okay, sorry, we ran a little long there. So housing challenges, so housing, again, families are moving every 2 to 4 years, showing up in Traverse City. I know this entire group knows the challenges of housing in Traverse City. And I think what Traverse City has experienced for the last probably decade is now persistent everywhere in the country, thanks to some of the changes that was brought on upon COVID. But if you see there, all of our members, the military has a program that says, hey, this member, based upon their seniority in the organization, really it's more, this person's an 18-year-old kid right out of high school. We don't think that they should be living in a 4-bedroom house, single family home. That's not reasonable. They're going to be living in a 1-bedroom apartment. So it's kind of life cycle, where you are in your life cycle, and what the military thinks is a reasonable housing for you, and then your dependency status. So how many members of your family. So they assign a basic allowance for housing. And one of the issues that we've been working through, and this is hard, you'll see that number there. We did a survey a year and a half ago, and we discovered that pretty much 84% of our workforce, the basic allowance for housing doesn't meet their needs. So that means that in order to find the housing that they're living in, that's just coming out of their base salary instead of the housing. And members are forced to buy homes, which can be a risk. I mean, I think the members that bought homes in the last couple of years are winning, but a lot of members, if you go back to 2006, 7, 8 timeframe, there were military members that just took a total wash on homes back there when the housing market collapsed, and then they had to move. And unlike a large corporation, the Coast Guard's not going to buy your home and cover the loss. So housing is a huge challenge for us, and we've been working through that issue somewhat successfully. I would say we've been working through that issue unsuccessfully within the military channels, more successfully within our local channels and partnerships. We've secured a couple leases for our members that the military pays for, and then we can assign members to those. And then just kind of anywhere that Chuck and I went, and we kind of talked about our housing challenges, even to a forum like this, somebody came up and said, hey, I've got somebody that has a house, and we would love to rent it to a coastie, and can I give you some information? And we give it to our housing office, and then a new member comes in and scores a home for their tour here. But that can be a challenge. And that's, quite honestly, I mean, if you go into leadership and motivation, it's hard to get a new member that's showing up to Traverse City and they want to be a team player. They want to do all these things, but Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, food, water, shelter, like we can't provide them shelter. And so it's hard to have somebody engaged in the team when basic things like where their family's going to live is hard to meet. Next slide on that. That's just kind of more on that. So our members are, 353 out of pocket above, that's average. And for some of those junior rates, I mean, we're talking guys that make 35 grand a year down there at the bottom end of our enlisted rating, those real junior guys. So it's a challenge. Next slide, please. This is just more housing data. The other thing is you see that there's the plot graph of where our members live. So we're right there in the central, at the airport. You can see where we are. And so you see that our folks go further and further away from the airport. Red is bad. Red is folks that are paying out of pocket. And so our green dots are generally a little further away. But with the housing market here locally, you see that almost everybody's red there. They're paying out of pocket. And we have people that are moving further and further away. And that's a challenge for us, obviously. We recall people. We have a requirement and we have a need to recall people to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, and in February in the middle of a lake effect snowstorm. That's a challenge for our guys that are living west of Long Lake or living in Kingsley, and now they've got an hour and a half drive through the snowstorm to come into work. Next slide, please.
Here, I'll pick it up from here. And the one thing I want to bring up on the housing, yeah, we've got our challenges, and I know pretty much all of society has challenges with housing right now, but I want to link it back to the leadership piece. I'd said in there, I talked about loyalty as a two-way street, and top down is probably more important. Well, our efforts on the housing situation I guess could be a tangible example of that. It was basically Andy and I who were, busting our tails, trying to do everything we could we're never going to crack the code on it, but to, try to alleviate some of those concerns and help our people's transition into Traverse City and help them with their families settling in, taking care of our people. That was a number one priority, and that consumed a lot of our time. And actually, we brought up childcare earlier. Same thing in COVID, in the height of the pandemic with all the, where childcare was pretty much non-existent, beyond how we had to structure to keep our people separated and protected and yet get the mission done. We had to factor in childcare situations. So we had to work around people's schedules. There were some people, it was, look, got it. You know what? You're not coming to work, or you just come to work on whenever you think you can based around the childcare situation. We had to take care of our people. So lots of challenges we had to deal with to ensure the mission was accomplished. But first and foremost, priority was taking care of our people. And that's that loyalty as a two-way street. Community involvement, volunteering, we talked about, we swagged it, I don't know, 5,000 hours. And that's just our active members. And Andy said it, all of their dependents contribute even more there. But this slide is just to give you an idea of all the different organizations that we volunteer for in the community. And it's just to show that, hey, this air station brings a lot more to the region than just you've got a search and rescue piece or the actual money inject that goes in the community. There's a lot of intangibles that come from them being there. And I apologize, they're mostly pictures of me for the examples, but that's all I had. But anyway, we're involved with quite a bit, and we really promote that. And one of the reasons is, well, there's several reasons. One, the Coast Guard kind of influences that, but the other piece is, the Traverse City experience, beyond just the beauty of the area and just how cool that the place is. There aren't many places where there's a sense of community that I've been stationed all around the country as there is in Traverse City. And furthermore, I know of nowhere where there's a community that gets behind its military like Traverse City does. And I've lived in some really big community areas like, the Tidewater region, and then, out here in Colorado Springs, which is probably one of the biggest military communities in the country. There's no place like Traverse City. It's incredible. It's why we're a Coast Guard city, and why we will be for a long time, and why we're one of the best Coast Guard cities. But we encourage our people to get involved because it's just that much more of that community experience and that much more of making ties to Traverse City and getting the most out of the tour. And it's incredible how many people step up. People will get here and they're like, I'm not sure, but then they hear from their peers, oh, we went and volunteered for this weekend and had a blast. And the next thing you know, they're joining the next time, and then everyone's into it, and they love it. And it's just a great circuitous, feedback loop that it helps in the morale of the unit without me even having to do anything. And the people, it's very enriching for the people, I guess is what I really want to say. Next slide. All right, and so the other part is, and I kind of said it, Coast Guard City and that, but it's incredible how much support and outreach we get from this community, and how many people are behind us. So like I said, I all the places I've lived around this nation, no place like Traverse City, and it's just incredible what everyone does for our Coast Guard and our members, and the generosity, the positivity, the outpouring of support. I can't thank anyone enough. And right here, Traverse Connect. I met with Mr. Call back in, like I said, I think it was late winter, early spring. Right away, Traverse Connect went into putting on a web page specifically for Coast Guard members, specifically for those, especially moving here, with links to everything they need to help themselves get settled. It's just, Traverse Connect didn't have to do that, but they did. And extremely valuable to our people. TCAPS has done the same thing for us. We had a problem with our personnel would get orders, but they couldn't sign, their kids up for school or activities in the summer until they had an address where they're physically going to live. Well, we know the housing challenges, and those were taking a long time. And then by the time they get their address, the opportunities they were looking for were gone. So TCAPS made it look, the moment you have orders at Traverse City, your address for us is the air station. And they've made a website, and they've made it easy for our people to transition. And then, there's just a host of other people, you can see agencies listed there that just incredible support for the air station. So it truly made it an honor to be in Traverse City and serving our nation from such a great community. Next slide. I think this might be it. Yeah, so there we go. Thank you. And there's Chris, the current commanding officer there on the right side. Unfortunately couldn't be there, but like I said, Andy's the real brains behind the thing, so I'm glad he participated. So with that, final comments, questions, concerns, discussions, all ears. I think we got about 14 minutes. Wow, we went longer than I thought. Good.
This was great. I have so many questions, Chuck, and I know that this is a leadership conversation, but you were kind enough to give several of the staff of Traverse Connect a tour of the state air station. Is that something that you're back? I guess I should be asking Andy, are you back to giving tours of the air station?
Yes. Yeah, we can support some tours. We do have some requirements that are imposed on us from OMB and the federal government and DHS. But yes, we certainly would love to work to yes on that. I'll throw my email so you have my contact information in the bottom of the comment section, and if you guys email me, we will get that. We'll work on getting that set up.
Thank you.
Andy and Chuck, I've got a question for you. I think it was Andy, you said it, we grow our own, right? Based on the structure of the organization, and you're bringing people in young and you're developing them as leaders. So I'm curious, it may be Coast Guard in general, but I wonder if there's Traverse City specific, what you're doing to grow those leaders. And then a second question tied to that, is there the risk in the military structure that you run up against the Peter principle, where you promote someone to their level of incompetence, where they get beyond what their ability is? And is there room, if that's the case? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, two great points. So the first one, let me go to the second one. That one's easier. Of course, the Peter principle exists in the military. So now, the only good thing is the way our promotion system works, the way, and it's not just promotion, it's certain jobs, like to be the commanding officer of the air station, there's a whole screening process you have to go through just to end up in a candidate pool to maybe get selected. So, guys will get to that point, but once they get there, they're quickly weeded out. Now that doesn't mean we get rid of them. Here's a great leadership discussion, and I'm going to take us down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but the one probably biggest challenge we have in the military as opposed to in the civilian world is we can't hire and fire like what goes on there. We have to deal with what we are given. And so that really forces leadership, because if you do get someone that's not cutting the mustard, you can't just go, all right, you're out of here. Yeah, there's a process to start weeding them out of the military, but it's a long process. You can't fire on the spot. So in the meantime, you've got to do something with this person because you're counting on them. You only have so many members to make that team work, and you've got to do it. So now you've got to deal with that weak link and try to bring them up to speed. And that'll go into the first part of your question. We'll come back to that. But so you don't have as many of those tools available. So when you take that to the Peter principle, yes, people will end up rising there. But then as you get more and more senior, there's more and more of those looks that are being done, like the screening I talked about for being a commanding officer, such that, okay, you're going to get weeded out at some point. You're not going to get those jobs. The writing's going to be on the wall. Hey, the service is done with you, and then people usually at that point, they're senior enough, they're going to retire or whatever from there. So going back to the first part about the training that goes on, and Andy's right. I mean, we grow our own. Enlisted, you can come out of high school. All you got to really in the military, all you got to be is 18 years old. If you're 18 years old, you can be in the military, and the military is going to train you from there. Okay, now in the officer corps, yeah, that you go to college in that first, but your college has, I did industrial and operations engineering. You know how much I've done that in the military? Zero, right? So all of my training has come from the military, and what's required. And like I said, there's a continual training process that goes on, and it's not just in your skill set. There's also the whole leadership piece that goes with it. So within the air station itself, just by the way we're organized, you saw that flow chart of the org chart, and there's different layers. Well, those are leaders at each of those nodes, and the people within them, they're responsible. And there's other nodes that we didn't even show that get smaller. So the way it kind of works is, you take it in the enlisted ranks. You come in, you go to boot camp, you wait for your rate training. You get your rate training. So now you're a qualified aircraft mechanic. Well, really, it's just a license to learn. It's same thing for officers. You go to flight school, you get your wings, you come out of flight school, you basically now have a license to learn. And you're going to learn those skills on the job, but you've got mentors all the way up the chain that are helping you. So as you now gain those skills and get confident, you start getting put into smaller leadership positions along the way. Just like in the civilian world, next thing you know, hey, I'm a shift manager and I've got like 3 people under me. And so now you get experience dealing with, I'm beyond just my skill set that I'm responsible for. I'm now responsible for those people. And then as you show success in there and advance, you keep going up until your sphere of influence, your responsibilities over people grows more and more. And so it's a lot of on-the-job training. Now, that doesn't mean we don't do the academia piece of it and do studies and talks about it and all that. We do, but the majority of it comes from on-the-job training. And to be honest, I find that far more effective than going and doing studies. But heck, I think all of my successful leadership has come from seeing other bad leadership, to be honest with you, over 30 years. Learning what not to do. I mean, there's a lot of that, unfortunately, but it's effective. So hopefully that answers your questions and gets to it. Yeah, cool, good, thanks.
The last thing I would add, Chuck, is in addition to the on-the-job leadership, the Coast Guard is building out, trying to follow some of the other schools that the DoD has had for a long time, and we offer leadership classes that are working towards becoming mandatory at certain growth points throughout either an officer or an enlisted career. So to make Chief Petty Officer, which is a very big deal in the enlisted world, as soon as they advance, they go to a Chief Petty Officer Academy for about 6 weeks in Petaluma. At the 03 level, which is probably a 5 to 6 year growth point as an officer, there's a leadership class that's about an 8-week class that people go to, and then at the 04, prior to making commander, 05 rate, which is probably about a 15 year, there's another 8-week class that people are going to, and that's going towards a mandatory requirement.
Yeah, that's some of the academia I was talking about, but that's some good granularity on it.
Do you guys have, like, in the Air Force, they had the Airmen and Family Readiness Center? I don't know what it would be called, like in the Coast Guard, but that helps with families, like finding resources, connecting like spouses, resume writing, or like the TAPS, like the transitional programs.
I'll let you do that, Andy.
Yeah,
you got to deal with that all the time.
We do. I think we're significantly under resourced compared to what an Air Force base is going to have, and we don't have that locally. Any large Air Force base is going to have that on base, and they're going to have they're going to have a greater degree of partnerships within the community. Our resource for that is out of our district office in Cleveland. So Cleveland's ability to support members in Traverse City is less than if that office was here in Traverse City.
Would there be opportunities like for people that are around the community, or like helping people transition out of the military, or for spouses?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that would be an informal process that we would set up here locally, if that's kind of what you're asking. I mean, yeah, there's always opportunities for us to do. Chuck alluded to it, you know, the authority of command is pretty vast. So anything that we want to take on ourselves and resource ourselves, or with partners in the community, we are free to do so.
Yeah, can I chime in here really quick on that? So one of the reasons I put skilled labor on that slide, you know, what we bring in here, because, you know, I know the challenges Traverse City's having with the labor market. And in fact, I sat in on the VTC a week or two ago talking about all that. And I wanted to hear it just to see if it would influence anything in the conversation today. And because I'm coming back to Traverse City, I'm interested anyway. But talk loyalty is a two-way street. You know, we talk the housing things and all that. Well, the same thing goes for, you know, yes, as a CEO, I'm responsible for 120 members, but in reality, as Andy said, I'm responsible for 120 family units. And I've got to make sure that those families are happy. And so when there's anything from the community that reaches in and wants to help us, like in this case, you know, I would see this getting into spouse employment where, you know, not only is that helping us, it's helping the community, because there is skilled labor that we are bringing in. I can't speak for the current CEO. Andy, I'll let Andy defer here. I would order this. I'll be like, let's make this happen. What linkage can we do to start exploring this and see where we can go with it? And, you know, we'll find the right person on base. Heck, it could be even a spouse that wants to take the leadership on this, but we would find the right person to link up and start establishing these ties. This is exactly one of the reasons I reached out to Traverse Connect, to try to rebuild the relationship we have, and why I'm so thankful at just how generous Traverse Connect has been right off the bat in bringing us into the family. So it's conversations like this that absolutely, yes, we would love to do that, because it's a win for both of us, but selfishly, that's taking care of some of my responsibilities.
Some of the resiliency programs when I was over in Germany and Italy that we started, like for the spouses and families, were really awesome. I know you mentioned like younger spouses, and they don't necessarily know what to do, even if there are a ton of resources off base. That's their comfort zone. And I noticed when I became a spouse after active duty, I had a whole new mindset. When I was active duty, I was kind of like, well, I know. I was like a spouse, and I was like, I don't automatically have a job and friends, and I don't know, and I'm pretty outgoing. So I think those programs are really important. And, you know, Traverse is a great community that would have some connections. I'm in Cadillac, but I'd be willing to travel sometimes.
Miranda, it looked like a lot of housing was down your way too. The team that's working on a Traverse City Air Station right now, there's a lot of homes near you.
Yeah, and that could come into play with the spouses. We'd love to have something here at the chamber and do that. I'm passionate about it because I did it for about 17 years.
Any additional questions or comments from those that are here still?
Hey, I'll make sure my email gets sent out too, and anyone is welcome to contact me with any conversation you want to have offline. If you want to further the conversation we had today, you got other questions, you want to know more about NORAD and Northcom and how Santa's going to do this year, whatever you guys want to, but I'm totally willing to have those conversations. So I'll make sure you get my contact info.
I'll send it all out with the recording.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today and being part of the conversation.
Thank you.